Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Exploring Energy series presented by Montana Renewable Energy Association. My name is McKenna Sellers. I'm the Executive Director for MREA, and today I'm here in foggy Helena, Montana, and I'm very excited about our presentation focused on registered apprenticeships in clean energy today. So if you'd be so kind, please introduce yourself, where you're tuning in from in our chat so we can see who's here and welcome you. And the Exploring Energy series is a lunchtime series from MREA where we cover energy issues impacting Montana and beyond. We do these on the first Wednesday of every month to explore renewable energy technology, the latest trends in energy development, and then we also connect with experts working on the future of our energy system. We have an archive of past presentations ranging from how the Inflation Reduction Act impacts labor, rural energy for America, REAP funding, tribal sovereignty with renewables, and all of that can be found on the MREA YouTube page, which I've linked here. So today, our Exploring Energy series is focused on registered apprenticeships with clean energy. We're very pleased and offer a warm welcome to Richard Lawrence from the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. And to give those who are new to MREA, MREA is a nonprofit 501c3 member-based organization, and our mission is to advance the renewable energy industry of Montana. We do this through education, through industry engagement, and through advocacy. So whether it's a community meeting in a church basement or working through the halls of the Capitol, MREA is the go-to network for renewable energy action in the state of Montana. And we love what we do. If you want to be a part of this, and if you're moved by that vision, we encourage you to become a member. You can be a household member, a business member, nonprofit member. We have all sorts of levels that could work for you. So back to housekeeping. If you'd be so kind to keep yourself muted during the presentation, just to avoid background noise, there will be opportunities for question and discussion at the end. Attendees can submit questions directly during the presentation in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat, save any of those for the end. And then in the case that we do not get to every single question, I'd encourage you to email us at info@montanarenewables.org and make sure we can get your question answered. So now on to the presentation. I mentioned that Richard is from IREC, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. That's a nonprofit built on 40 years of really rich history, and their mission is to build the foundation for rapid adoption of clean energy and energy efficiency to benefit people, economy, and planet. They have a vision of 100% renewable, a clean energy future that is reliable, resilient, and equitable. And I'd like to introduce you also to Richard to give you a little more about his background. Richard is the program director at IREC, and that's a national nonprofit. I just mentioned their whole mission, but Mr. Lawrence leads the Solar Ready Vets Network, which is the U.S. Department of Energy sponsored initiative connecting veterans and transitioning service members to training, certifications, apprenticeships, and careers in the solar industry. And the U.S. Department of Labor's Apprenticeships in Clean Energy, or ACE network, which we'll be talking about a lot today, expanding registered apprenticeship opportunities in the clean energy industry. Mr. Lawrence earned his BS degree in science education from Florida State and an MS degree in environmental education from Lesley University through the Audubon Expedition Institute. Since 2002, he's focused his career on renewable energy education, training, workforce development, credentialing, and quality assurance. Richard's worked for several nonprofit academic institutions, including Self-Reliance, Hudson Valley Community College, the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, that's NABCEP, and the Institute for Building Technology and Safety in positions ranging from adjunct instructor to executive director. So IREC was selected by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Apprenticeship to serve in this registered apprenticeship network intermediary position. And so that's why we've invited IREC to present with us today on how that work is going and ways that we could potentially find inroads for Montana as we're thinking about the workforce. So with that, I would love to pass the mic to Richard. Take it away.
Thank you. Just share screen here. Oh, did not seem to work. Did that work?
Yes. Yep. We've got your
You
screen. Looks great.
see the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see if this works. Thank you for having me. McKenna. Good to be here talking about the ACE network, and did a lot of my introduction, so don't need to go through that. Let's see if I can switch slides now. There we go. Okay, I do have to start off with our disclaimer. As you said, our project is funded by the federal government, and so with that, we are not representing the government, and anything I reference is not endorsed by or supported, especially in terms of companies and things like that. So you can read that later. That's the disclaimer. You talked about IREC. We are a nonprofit organization, been around a little over 40 years now, working for that transition to a clean energy future. We do that primarily through three main objectives of workforce development, which is the division that I work in. And we also do a lot in the regulatory space. So you may see us interacting in convenings of regulatory aspects of energy, net metering, interconnection, things like that. And then we also do local initiatives. So we manage things like the Soul Smart program, where we designate communities, help them make changes, do a lot of sort of permitting, interconnection, or sort of permitting and zoning, and work supporting that through that effort and other things. So lots of activities, lots of resources on our website, irecusa.org, and all those areas. If you're not familiar with it, sign up and keep informed. We're always putting out a lot of good resources for the industry and related professionals, people engaged. So primarily talk about the Apprenticeships in Clean Energy Network. This is a new project we have just starting up this last quarter, just been going a couple of months now, and getting everything underway. That said, we've been working on apprenticeships for a number of years now under the Solar Ready Veterans Network project as well. So we have lots of experience with that. If you're not aware, and many people aren't, including those veterans who are in apprenticeship programs, that veterans can access GI Bill housing allowances if they're in a registered apprenticeship program. So it's a great added incentive to that veteran to, rather than, everybody thinks of sort of the GI Bill as going to college and paying for college expenses, but there's also the other pathway of going through an apprenticeship program, which typically doesn't have those same costs to the student while they're learning that occupation, but they are able to access some incentives through that GI Bill to cover some of their housing and other expenses during that training. So we've been doing a lot of work on that, but we've been that kind of set us up to get this contract with the Department of Labor and really be the expert for the industry to help navigate the apprenticeship system. So this contract is initially 1 year, but we're expecting 4 additional option years of so 5-year total. We are the prime, but we've got a really great network of other people to help us with all the tasks associated with this intermediary work. Primary activities are related to that outreach and engagement. So this type of work here, connecting with different stakeholder groups. Certainly a lot oriented towards the industry. Apprenticeship program has to have an employer involved, paying and training that employee as an apprentice, but often involves other stakeholders as well. Could be the training providers for sure. Certainly the state workforce boards and things like that, supporting the workforce development, and other community-based associations and such on the recruiting of candidates. So we're doing outreach to from high schools, community-based associations, state agencies, and of course the industry as well around this. So lots of outreach, talking about the apprenticeships and what they are and the benefits. Then also follow that with the technical support and actually helping navigate the process, implement programs, understand your options, and recruit and retain diverse apprentices. So we also do have some financial incentives that we are distributing through the project to help cover some of the costs. Those do need to go to an employer, but could cover some training costs and be funneled through to other venues and stuff too. We have relatively modest financial incentives there, but also help navigate the the system of identifying if there are other incentives available from the state or from other federal sources, and try to patch those together to help alleviate any of the additional costs that are. So like I said, this is a concept project. We've got to reach all those stakeholder groups of the workforce association, workforce agency, obviously industry, education providers, and so we've got a number of partners who have real expertise in each of those areas and big networks in those. So first, Institute for Workplace Skills Innovation, they're an apprenticeship expert as well. They do a lot of work across the world, really, in apprenticeships and workforce development, and providing a lot of support for us there. Our trade associations with the SEIA, Solar Energy Industry Association, and the Building Performance Association. These are, the ways we're reaching out to our employers. Oh, sorry. And then on the recruitment side, they were working with the Service Year Alliance, so network of all the service year programs out there, like AmeriCorps and others like that. The National Association of Workforce Boards help us to reach out to the workforce system, both, and then the Center for Renewable Energy Advanced Technology Education. If you're not aware of them, they're the National Science Foundation funded Center of Excellence for Renewable Energy Technology Education. So they've got a great network of technical high schools and community colleges, lots of curriculum resources and other things like that. So helping us reach out to that education providers. Renewables Forward is a trade association focused on diversity, bringing diversity to the clean energy industry. And they're helping us with a lot of the diversity issues, and again, the industry outreach. HBCU Clean Energy Initiative is connected to all of the historically Black colleges and universities in the country, and working on energy programs there, and in solar energy efficiency, and the engaging in workforce development there, and connecting to those training providers. And we are working with another similar state agency or association like MREA. We actually have the Arkansas Advanced Energy Foundation, very similar organization, engaged in the project. They're doing a lot of work promoting in that state, and we're using that as a template then to move out to other states. A lot of apprenticeship activity does need to be implemented at the state level, as we'll talk about. Finally, where we go is our web developer. They actually focus on workforce development type sites. So as I said, we're here to help build apprenticeship programs, serve as an intermediary, so the liaison between whoever it is we're working with and the Department of Labor. We can represent the Department of Labor and help resolve issues and get direct connection into there. A lot of focus on increasing diversity. Goals of at least half of the apprentices that come through the program that we support are going to be from various diverse backgrounds, underrepresented populations, underserved populations. And so lots of outreach through these accelerators. That's convenings where we get together and try to work through topics with these stakeholder groups, promote innovation. We're looking at working with community colleges to offer college credit, things like that. And we can help with the curriculum support, making sure that we're trying to make sure that these programs are fairly standardized across the industry, and the apprenticeship program in general, apprenticeship system in general, is the intent, as we'll discuss. So, what are registered apprenticeships? We'll just start real quick. I know everybody's sort of vaguely familiar with this, but first of all, a registered apprenticeship is an apprenticeship that is registered with the Department of Labor or with a state apprenticeship agency. And Montana is a state apprenticeship agency state, so you would be registering with the state agency there if you wanted to do a program. But first and foremost, they are industry-led. They're driven by the industry. It starts with the occupation that you're training somebody in. Those occupations are, aligned, they're vetted, they're approved across an industry. So there's a common understanding of what it means. So similar to, completing a degree program, let's say in engineering or biology or whatever that degree may be. You may take that degree from a different college, but you understand that that degree is going to be fairly similar when you have a electrical engineering from one school and electrical engineering from another school. Obviously there's going to be some variation, but they're going to be fairly similar in terms of the content of what that was taught, so that you can have an expectation of somebody coming out of that training of what they have learned. And that's what an apprenticeship, we agree to that occupation. We say this is what it kind of takes to train somebody to learn that job. And that is really driven by the industry first and foremost. And if any occupation does need to be approved by industry groups, and it has to have a paid job. Point number 2 there. Every apprentice is a paid employee of an employer. They are getting trained by that employer on site, and they're helping them learn the job that they need to do for that employer. So it is, tied into that employment opportunity. It's a great workforce development tool in that way. But with that is a structured learning process. So through both an on-the-job learning component and through supplemental education. So you have both working on the job, learning those skills under the supervision of a mentor who understands that occupation and what it takes. But then you're also taking classes. The format of those can vary, but you need to take at least 144 hours per year of supplemental education. That could be delivered by the employer, but separate outside of the work environment. Or it could be, often it's through a college or, sometimes a union or other training provider that would be delivering that. Registered apprenticeships really do help expand diversity. The regulations that are built into the apprenticeship system there, have diversity at its core, and making sure there's equal employment opportunity and non-harassment and things, and conflict resolution processes. They do have to have a safe work environment, and ultimately at the end of the program they're issued a credential, as we talked about, that's recognized nationally. Apprenticeships, whether registered or not, are with this combination of on-the-job learning and some related instruction, that system is a proven model. It's literally centuries of all across the world, as old as any training has been. It's been done in a learn by doing under the supervision of a mentor. And so it's just it's probably the most proven effective workforce development process of training somebody in how to do something. And it's also, apprenticeships are a very effective recruitment tool. So because they are a paid job while they're learning those skills, it helps to remove a lot of barriers, and shows that commitment the employer has to advancing that person in their job. There's lots of benefits for employers. Lots of studies out there in terms of increased worker productivity. And you really can customize that training to meet your needs of what you want those employees to learn. But increased productivity, reduced turnover. The apprentices see the commitment that the employer has to their development and their education, and helping them succeed. And even at the end of that apprenticeship program, when they quote graduate, most, by far vast majority, the intent is that they then remain on as employees, and in that occupation is now a skilled professional doing that work, right, instead of an apprentice or a journey person, so to say. Again, diversity helps. This pay while you earn while you learn model helps to increase diversity of our staff. Can also help with some regulatory compliance. So if you have licensing requirements in certain occupations, a lot of times a pathway to get that license is through a registered apprenticeship. So there's often connections there. And then also, as we said, financial incentives and technical support. So if you're working on a registered program, as opposed to one that's just a workforce development system that you're creating internally, if you actually want to register that, now you can get access to often financial incentives through state funding, and through programs like ours, the ACE network, and again, that technical support as well to help you with that process and all aspects of it, really. So A lot of interest in apprenticeships is being driven by the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act has at its core some provisions, some labor provisions that are trying to make sure that there are good jobs associated with all this investment. Literally billions of dollars of investment that are going out through this act, and they want to make sure that these are good jobs that are created. So there's two aspects of that: is prevailing wages for all laborers and mechanics on the jobs, and then apprenticeship requirements in terms of, and we'll walk through those real quick. But and that's where I'm focused. I'm not going to go into the prevailing wage at all. I know, but they are somewhat interrelated. But there's some aspects that applies to the prevailing wage, and some where it is just, or somewhere it's just prevailing wage that require, and others where apprenticeships are going to come in. So as I think, most, at least if you're in the industry, you're aware of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's base tax credits with the investment tax credit of 6% of the project cost. Can be obtained if you don't meet any labor of those prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. But if you do want that full value, you need to meet those prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements to get that full 30% cost. And of course, there are those additional adders. Again, not going to talk about those, but you can get additional 10% for using domestic content, developing the project in an energy community, and other things like that. Upwards of 70% of the total project costs, I believe, or 60 or 70 there can be covered. Again, not going to talk about those. I'm just the apprenticeship person. So, but to be eligible, those programs do need to be, quote, registered, right? They need to be registered with the Department of Labor, again, in Montana, with that state apprenticeship agency. So these provisions in the IRA go all across almost every technology that is funded in there. So it's your alternative fuel vehicle, your refueling systems, even the production of hydrogen, the energy efficient commercial building deduction. So that's another big one. If you're doing any energy efficiency work in the commercial space, these apprenticeship requirements are going to be there to get those tax credits, and those have all been increased as well in that side. And then, of course, the big ones on the renewable space, the investment tax credit or the production tax credit, typically whether you're doing solar or wind, but those are, won't go into details, but some of those are a little interchangeable right now. There's options for solar as well. They can do the PTC currently. But the prevailing wages are in all of those, and then there's a couple of sections there where you can build the new nuclear power plant. You don't need apprentices for that. If you're going that route, I won't be helping you. So a little just further on that, those apprenticeship requirements, there is a minimum labor hours requirement. So this is an overall total hours of work by these laborers and mechanics. So it's really your on-site labor. It specifies it's, the foreman or supervisor does not count towards those labor hours, or any management or administration or professional services. So your engineers and your administrative staff and your project development, all that does not cover, it does not fall under this. It's just that on-site construction maintenance labor that is construction, alteration, and repair. I'll use the specific words there. Has to be performed by the apprentice. And so there's the overall total project hours requirement of 12.5% starting this year, and 15% starting in January, going on for the rest of the bill. There is a ratio requirement. So that ratio requirement just means that you need to meet whatever the requirement is in your standard for your apprenticeship. So typically that's it's often a 1-to-1 ratio of one apprentice to one journey worker, but that varies by state. Could be, there's a couple different ways that can go, but you have to meet that ratio that's set by the standard there. The other big one to be aware of is the participation requirement. So you've got the total hours, but every contractor who has at least 4 employees on the job needs at least 1 apprentice. Now, they could have 50 employees and only have 1 apprentice. That's fine. They meet that requirement. but you then also have the total labor hours you need to look at among all contractors, subcontractors. So any contractor, subcontractor on the job with at least 4 people needs to have at least one registered apprentice to get those tax credits. And then the wages that they're paid when you get to the prevailing wage side, an apprenticeship program has a set of wages that are agreed to in that program, and you'd follow that wage schedule that's approved as part of the program. There are the exemptions to this is, primarily this applies to larger projects. So anything less than 1 megawatt is exempted, and anything that was started before January 29th of 2023 is exempted. But after January 29th, if you've started a project since then, you're going to need to meet these requirements in order to get the tax credits. There is a good faith effort. So and some of these regulations are actually still being written. There's some draft regulations that are proposed regulations out right now. I don't believe they've been finalized yet, but they have that proposed rulemaking said basically the regulations say you have if you reach out to an apprenticeship program that customarily provides apprentices as part of their services, i.e. a trade union, and if they're non-responsive after 5 business days, then you've got to pass. Well, the proposed regulations say you need to go back 120 days after that first attempt and try again. That's still being, again, worked out in the regulations. They have not been formally published yet. And then there is a cure provision. So if there are mistakes, you mentioned, you notice those and you bring those up, you can fix those. There's some penalties, and then there's some very strict penalties if you choose to willfully, if you claim those tax credits, you get those, the incentives, 30% of your project cost paid for, then they find out that you willfully did not have those apprentices that you needed to have. There's some severe penalties around that, $500 an hour for that. So I do want to point out, though, while we're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, that applies to those construction jobs. Apprenticeships are a great tool for any occupation, if it's an apprenticeable occupation. We see growing apprenticeships in the healthcare industry, in the IT sector. So, they're not limited to construction trades. So we are looking at some other occupations in the clean energy industry, like your salespeople, your customer service, system design. There's a wide variety of applications that can be trained, and IT as well, if you have IT needs, things like that. So you want to make sure that's not limited to construction trades, although that's certainly where a lot of the bulk of the apprenticeship system has been up to now. There's a lot of work going into actually things like nursing was just approved as apprenticeable. Education, a teacher can now be an apprenticeable occupation. So there's lots of things you can learn through this on-the-job training process. Generally, apprenticeship programs fall in these 3 main categories. You can be that joint labor and management sponsored. So this is where you have a labor union and a management association involved, and they're jointly running a program. That's going to be your labor-based, your labor unions. We call this the easy button. If you're looking to meet, they've been doing this a very long time. They know how these apprenticeship systems work, and they do great training there through those. And that is a group sponsor program. So contractors join those programs. The union is the sponsor, or that joint committee is the sponsor. And then you sign up either as a signatory either to that union, or potentially do that through a project labor agreement and just get those apprentices and other labor provided through that labor agreement for a particular project. Other group sponsored programs. So often we see community colleges or educational institutions, trade associations. So this is where you'll see like the Independent Electrical Contractors Association, or the Associated Builders and Contractors, groups like that. These trade associations, or it could be a consortium of employers. So a group of people get together and they want to manage that program consistently amongst the whole team, have the same type of training that everybody's been doing. Obviously, everybody trains on their job with those skills, but then there's, the management of that system, the actual, tracking the apprentice's progress and stuff is done by another entity. But the employer can also be an individual sponsor. You can choose to go it yourself, run all the aspects of it, do the in-house, you obviously have to do the on-the-job training. You can partner with an educational institution or some other group to provide that training, or you can do it yourself sometimes too. There's some different steps there, but there's basically say there's a variety of options, but typically it's either a group sponsored program, either by a union or another group, and or you sort of do it yourself. Again, we can help you understand those options. To be an apprenticeable occupation, it has to involve skills that are typically learned on the job. And then here's a key one, is be commonly recognized throughout the industry. So when we say, oh, you're an electrician, we understand what that means. Somebody that's completed an electrician training program, we know what that means, whether they did that program in Montana or Florida, right? It's they trained on similar stuff, they took similar classwork, and so that's those occupations need to be approved by the Department of Labor or the state agency to be apprenticeable. Key thing with it is an apprenticeable job does need to take at least 1 year to learn. So, example I use is your burger flipper at your fast food joint is not necessarily an apprenticeable job, but a chef at a restaurant is. It would take longer to learn that trade than it does at another. So it needs to take at least 1 year to be approved. And during that time, you need to have at least 144 hours of training, again, outside the job site, to be approved as an apprentice program. Typically, construction trades are in the 3 to 4 year range, whereas some other occupations, again, it depends on what is needed to learn that job. It could be as little as a year, 2 to 3 years, just again, depends on that job. Here's some common ones that we see in the in the solar industry specifically. And actually recently there was a trade agreement that was announced between the electricians, the laborers, and the operating engineers to differentiate the tasks that those occupations would do on a solar job. But there's others that could be involved. Certainly electrician, and even in electrician, there's a couple of subspecialties as well. So you could have somebody that's more focused on substation, which is going to be, your high voltage type stuff and your transformers and your substation work, versus your other electrician that's going to be running wires throughout the system. Again, your equipment operator, your pile drivers with the carpenters. There's a variety of occupations that can work. They could even go, down others like truck driver, and we're starting to hear some things like fence erector is doing labor on the job and installing those fences and things like that. So those are all on-site labor. You'd have to look at the appropriate occupation for doing that work. Again, program standards. So standard is sort of, this defines how the program works. The Office of Apprenticeship nationally has those occupations, big list of all of those. There's over 1,000 occupations that have been approved, and they have copies of standards of all of those that you can look at and say, see if it's a 1 year program, 3 year, what the main tasks are that somebody should learn, what the types of coursework. They've got a starting outline for each of those. And then again, local standards. So about half the states, a little over half the states now, are state agencies, and the other half run through the national office. We are working on national guideline standards for a variety of these occupations. And so what a guideline standard would say is, we'd say, okay, if you're a solar company and you want to train electricians, we're working on developing a standard that would say, here's sort of a template of what your apprenticeship program would look like. And the purpose of those guideline standards is to make sure that this is commonly recognized across the industry. So when you're training as that, quote, solar electrician in one place, then you would, have similar skills in other areas. Helps with employers as their, employee is moving from project to project or moving from company to company. You're moving to another area, you're hiring people. If they've gone through a similar program, you trust what the skills that they've learned, and they can enter in at the appropriate level of their apprenticeship. Or if they've completed that apprenticeship, you can recognize what they've learned there. And this is to provide that consistency. You can modify those up to 25%. So recognize there's local variations. The work done there is going to be different than the work done in another area. The different types of different size and structures of the companies, different types of projects they work on, but they're all going to be sort of aligned under that national standard. And again, these may serve as the basis for licensing, but that's not necessarily an official purpose. It's more of a workforce development on our end, but states often use apprenticeship programs as a pathway to licensing. So they need to be aligned on that. So what is it in a standard? A standard includes it defines what that approach is in the term. So approach is it a time-based program that says you need to complete X number of hours on the job to complete the program, and it's also as you step up through the stages of your apprenticeship, going from that wage schedule to go to the next wage schedule. This would require a certain amount of time. Others are based on more of a competency approach that just says, okay, well, when you're ready to test out on this competency, then you can move to the next stage. And then you can also have a hybrid of those between the time and competency based. So it starts with that approach. You're doing a time-based or competency based approach, and then we develop that work process schedule. So that shows what do they learn on the job, how many hours, or what are the competencies that they need to learn, and then what is that related instruction that they need to complete. So you define that. You define some minimum eligibility requirements. So what's the age limits? Do you give credit for prior experience? And then you have to define a probationary period as well. So there's these are various aspects. Again, we talked about the ratio, and that ratio is likely going to be determined by the state licensing requirements. That can vary state to state. And then you have that wage schedule. So an apprenticeship program has to have a fixed progression as somebody advances through that program, that they advance in pay and as well. And so there's a fixed schedule. They understand what they need to do to move to that next level and what they need to do to complete that program and graduate. And of course, as we mentioned, you have to have equal opportunity statements and affirmative action plans to recruit and hire and retain diverse candidates. We've got a great toolkit on our website that goes through all of these a little more depth. And like I said, we are here to help with our Solar Ready Vets network for people in the solar industry. That feeds into our apprenticeships in clean energy network, where we're that intermediary. We are working with the Solar Energy Industries Association, I said, as a partner. And here's my contact information, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Richard. That was such a wealth of information about what's going on. So at this point, we're opening it up to Q&A. There's options here if you'd like to, for convenience, putting your question into the chat. And then maybe towards the end, we can just unmute if you need to explain your question a little further. But Richard, I've got one to start. So just thinking about the success and setting up the ACE network for success with the apprenticeship criteria and requirements and follow up. I'm thinking about the applicability for small businesses. So if you've got a staff of 10 or less, what would be some of the barriers and maybe how the ACE network is thinking about that? Curious how you might respond to that.
Yeah, it's there's some aspect that it's scalable. If you're only training that one apprentice and you've got your one supervisor, and once you get the program set up, the administration of that isn't really there's not a lot there to report the progress to the Department of Labor. You do need to maintain some records associated with that, associated with your recruitment strategies and any candidates that applied for those positions and things like that. There's definitely compliance that needs to be done. It is manageable by small employers, but we definitely encourage the group sponsored programs because those help to alleviate some of the burden, but also make sure that you've got a quality program that you're participating in. So There are, that is one of the first things we look at is, okay, do you want to sponsor your own program? Or, here's some options for those group sponsorship options. So that would be looking at those labor unions, looking at those contractor associations. We're also working to create those partnerships. So if there's, a group of employers in an area, there's something we could work with MREA to say, all right, let's form a consortium here. We've also seen, often these programs sponsored by associations like MREA. So that could be an option we could explore too, to help alleviate some of that burden. But, there are options. It works. There's pathways to it. We can provide that support and help small employers understand the processes. But, often they will come to the conclusion that, hey, this is more work than we're willing to take. We're not training providers. We need to partner with a training association or a college, and to make sure that they're getting that quality education through the program. So we can help understand the options and explore those with anybody.
Great. Any questions for Richard, either in the chat or unmute? Let's see. We've got a question from Matt. Are there group sponsors currently available in Montana for solar companies, or any in the works? Excellent question. I think that this presentation here with IREC and the ACE network could potentially be the start of that. As far as official apprenticeships in solar, not that I'm aware of that we've operated or that we've built yet as an organization, and some of that has to do with scale. But one thing of note is that there's a few different economic development associations and two-year colleges that are working on a micro-credentialing program that I see as potential continuity with these. So it's micro-credentialing through some two-year institutions that could be focused on a whole host of trades, including solar and solar technicians. So while that's in the early stages, that could, I think there could be some synergy there for sure.
Yeah, I actually did not mention this in the occupations. There is a memo from Department of Labor that kind of goes into it as well, that came out about a month ago or so. But the solar installer is not an apprenticeable occupation, and is not likely to become apprenticeable in the near future. So when we're working with solar installers, we are looking at traditional occupations such as electrician and laborer. Those occupations can be modified to sort of meet the needs. Often an electrician is needed to do the work and get the license and things like that to pull the permit. So those are often where we're looking at, a lot of the work can be done by a construction laborer. And so when you're looking at group programs, there are some trade associations that do exist. I'll have to look at a little bit more into Montana specifically, but like there is the Montana Independent Electrical Contractors Association. So that is a contractor association that does have electrician programs. I'd have to look into if the laborers are there or other groups like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, laborers, and IBEW also does a lot of training through the JTC.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Karen Hilding. It seems like with the $3 million that the state received to work on a climate pollution reduction plan, that the timing, that it would make sense to, as part of that plan, have a section talking about training for this new workforce and for apprenticeships. I know Missoula College used to have a two-year program related in energy technology, and they had to get rid of that program with budget cuts. It seems like Montana is really lacking in this area compared to other states. And we really need our two-year schools to have programs for students that have this interest. And so it seems like it would be great to look at it kind of as a statewide approach, and looking at both high schools and two-year colleges, and see if there can be like I say, it could be coordinated with that statewide plan that has now been funded by the federal government. Seems like there might be a way to link those together.
Yeah, and often that is one thing that got cut out of the federal IRA. In some of the earlier drafts, there was funding specifically for the training aspect, but most of that got cut out. But where it is coming is through those state energy plans. But it
Okay.
is up to that state energy plan to say, yes, this is where, we're going to put those funding dollars. So yeah, that is the pathway to look at there.
Yeah, I think that would make total sense for Montana because there's a lot of interest among young people. I mean, because we had Energy Corps members working with us at the City Whitefish, there's so much interest among young people, and there's so little opportunities in Montana to get trained in these areas. And so yeah, I think there's a real need there that could be addressed.
Other questions for Richard? Got another that comes to mind since Karen brought up the energy and the energy, like the Resilience Corps, I think is what they're officially called now, but program through AmeriCorps. And I'm thinking about the Biden announcement from September about the Climate Corps. And I was also looking at the partnerships in this ACE network, including the Service Year Alliance, Richard. So I'm interested to hear how your consortium is thinking about the Climate Corps. I know that there's like this general excitement as far as who we talk to in Montana about what a great opportunity, but what now? And it seems like we're in this waiting period of like, when will this program be available or accessible for students? But yeah, wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, lots of excitement about the announcement, and I would rely on them for a little bit more detail. But from what I've heard, there's some of that follow up is kind of needed. That it's not the implementation is not fully there yet. But what they're doing, they're helping us connect those apprenticeship programs into those service years. So raising awareness about apprenticeship options to their service members. We're looking at pre-apprenticeship training options, so that they do a lot of training in those programs to do the skills that they're doing, and certainly as those climate cores develop. But even in those conservation related ones, many of them are doing energy efficiency work and things like that now, so they're doing a lot of sort of related skills. And looking for other training and career exploration, they incorporate those types of things in often into those programs. So they're helping to raise awareness across that service sector of the value of apprenticeships as a pathway. Once they're often at that transition point in their lives, looking to where they're going to go with their career, and so helping us just raise awareness of apprenticeships, and then obviously connect into programs as we get them developed. So we'll be doing more specific outreach when we have a employer partner in a particular area. We'll connect them with that service, those service years as a recruitment strategy to feed into those programs, and potentially do like I said, a pre-apprenticeship training there. And I did just question. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, another resource we have in Montana is the National Center for Appropriate Technology that was set up in the 70s. And actually, when I was a Vista volunteer doing energy work in 1981, that program was organized. The energy Vista work was being organized some by the National Center for Appropriate Technology way back then. And with having that center based in Butte, that might be another resource for some of this training.
Yeah. And I did just see a question come in the chat that I'll grab. The question is why a solar installer is not apprenticeable. So yeah, that is one we've been working on for a while now. The basic answer is it's not commonly recognized in the industry, is kind of what they come down to, is that there is objections by many people working in these construction trades that say solar installation, and basically the argument is solar installation is not an occupation in and of itself, that it is a task that other occupations do. That is the Department of Labor's stance on it, is that solar installation is a task that electricians do, and that carpenters do, and that iron workers do, and operating engineers do, and that all these other people do parts of that work as part of their job. And because of that, there is now a conflict with recognizing it as its own trade is because it's our, sort of parts of that work are already included in these other trades. And so the point of being commonly recognized in the industry is they say, okay, well, this is done by this job and this is done by this person. And when, that's sort of where it comes down to, is that Department of Labor at this point is not recognizing it as a trade in and of itself. This does, I will say, also connect into state licensing and things like that. There are really relatively few states that have those licenses for that occupation. To do that work in the state, you have to be an electrician or other things like that. So that's where it ties into that. There are a couple, at least one clear exception to this. So both Oregon and Florida have state apprenticeship agencies, and also they have state licenses for these occupations. And so they recognize it as a trade in the state through licensing, through contractor license. In Oregon, that renewable energy is a limited electrician license. In Florida, it's a separate contractor license. It covers both solar and photovoltaics and thermal. And those states have said, well, we recognize it as an occupation. Those states are also state apprenticeship agencies, so they have the ability to recognize them in the state, and they've both approved apprenticeship programs. Florida, the first one, with specifically solar installer. So it has been approved in Florida, but nationally, OA will not approve it because of the conflicts with other trades.
There's a question here about goals and success stories of the program. And I know that this is just year one and you're thinking of this is a 5-year horizon, but thinking about state application and the Arkansas Advanced Energy Foundation, you mentioned earlier in the talk here that Arkansas is ideally going to serve as a model for state application of these programs. Curious how far along that is, and if there's some case studies for this group to wrap our heads around.
Yeah. We don't have the case study out yet. We do have some case, we're just about to put out a case study of some employers that have successfully implemented some programs. So to date, we've got our toolkit online. We've got some resources there to help learn the process. We've been getting a lot of our systems set up to really serve companies and understand DOL systems of reporting all the information. But yeah, Arkansas has been doing this work for a little while now, before this project started. So they've been engaging their employers around this. They are working to sponsor some programs, and in electrical, they're also working in energy efficiency space. So the electrician is an occupation that they have registered and are getting their employers signed on to through that program. But yeah, we'll have more case studies to share, and certainly report out on that. We've seen some other states moving forward there as well. What is
I haven't seen this question from Hugh. Is that what you're reading right now, Richard?
Yeah, the solar technician. I think that was so. Often what you'll see too is the occupation it's actually registered under is the construction craft laborer, but then somebody calls that person a solar technician, or we see like solar mechanical installer or things like that. You can call the person almost whatever you want, but it's registered under a particular occupation. And so it's registered on where I said solar technician, that was in reference to the construction craft laborer occupation, which is a 2-year program. So the laborer, and that sort of depends on, again, somewhat it gets into licensing, somewhat gets in. When you look at the laborers, so the International Laborers Union did put out a job task analysis that said, what does a laborer do on a solar job? That has them doing work all the way through installing, obviously preparing the site, bringing materials to the site, all that stuff the labor would do, but then and erecting the racking systems, and then they actually have mounting modules and installing the conduit and pulling the wires through the conduit. that's in the laborer's definition of what a laborer can do on a solar job. So it's kind of everything except for connecting the electrical, making the electrical connections. Now that said, there was just a project labor agreement that was signed, or not project labor, a multi-trade agreement that was signed between the laborers, electricians, and the operating engineers to say what it does, and that actually, as far as I understand it, defines that the laborer can sort of install the racking systems and the site preparation, cleanup, all that. But then the electrician actually has to touch anything electrical, mount the modules, do all the conduit, the wiring, all of that. So it can vary a little bit as to sort of where that line is, but generally those two occupations together can do the bulk of the work. Again, with that equipment operator coming in to on these larger job sites, typically operating the equipment there.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We are almost to the top of the hour. Can we squeeze one more question in from Hugh? Would most all solar installer businesses in a position to support an apprentice laborer? I think that's going to, again, come down to scale, but I guess that's a nice direct question. Richard, any comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, it's the same system of administering that program, whatever their occupation is. Once you're kind of in the system, then it's just, what does that training look like? So a laborer training is more of a 2-year program and a 2-year commitment by both the employer and the apprentice to doing that training. So it's going to be 144 hours over for 2 years of related instruction as well there, versus an electrician you're going to have to do that for 2 more years. It's a 4-year program. So it's but the administration and all of that is kind of the same, no matter what the occupation is.
Great. I think that's a nice place to close it out. So thank you, everybody. And thank you so much to Mr. Lawrence for all of your contributions to our presentation today. I think that there was a ton to unpack and a ton to learn. We're excited about some of the findings that'll come out of the ACE network, and hopefully that contract continues for the next 5 years. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for your participation. A few announcements from MREA. We are in election season. So MREA is, like I said, a nonprofit, and we are run by a 9-person board of directors. We have some board positions open. So I'm adding to this chat our call for nominations, and that will wrap up at the end of November 24th. So if you or someone you know is interested in leadership with Montana Renewable Energy Association, I really invite you to give us a call if you've got questions, and give that a look over. And please share far and wide so that we get some good candidates. And finally, well, one penultimate, we'll have one more Exploring Energy series talk before the end of the year, and that will be Wednesday, December 6th at noon. And then finally, if you're not yet a member, or if you need to renew your membership with MREA, you can follow that QR code or the link in the chat so that we are stronger together and being a strong voice for renewable energy in the state. And then also able to consider setting up apprenticeship programs or the type of training opportunities that Richard mentioned in their talk with the ACE network. So if you're not yet a member, you can use the chat function and the link that I just shared, or follow the QR code. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.